Hello, it's Friday, the 21st of April. I'm Simon Whitney, and welcome to issue 55 of Travers Smith's Sustainability Insights. This week, we're looking at some important recent developments in sustainability regulation in Europe. Followers of European sustainability regulation have had a busy month. Although it's hard to remember a time when developments didn't come thick and fast, the last few weeks have been particularly intense. Many of the recent announcements have been long awaited and, in some cases, merely aim to mitigate problems caused by over-hasty and poorly drafted initial rules. For example, a consultation issued last week by the European supervisory authorities, the ESAs, on further changes to the SFDR's implementing rules would, if adopted in their current form, require many firms to change their processes and procedures again. The ESA's proposals include amendments to the disclosure templates, to website disclosures, and to the list of principal adverse impact or PAI indicators. Although these revised PAI indicators are largely consistent with emerging corporate reporting standards, no proper assessment has yet been made of the costs and benefits of the existing indicators. Nevertheless, it seems that policymakers' faith in the power of extensive disclosures to effect real economy change is so far undiminished. Also, last week, the European Commission finally answered some fundamental questions on the interpretation of the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, the SFDR. The Commission is, of course, constrained by law, meaning that the answers have provided only partial assistance. In particular, firms have been left with some discretion to determine what constitutes a, quote, sustainable investment, close quote, a crucial question for an Article 9 or dark green fund. That flexibility will now embolden more firms to launch Article 9 funds, even though it's important to note there's been no change to the earlier guidance that requires all the investments in an Article 9 fund to qualify as sustainable. The European Commission has tacitly acknowledged that the lack of clarity in the rules exacerbates greenwashing risks. They have suggested that firms should self-regulate this risk by exercising, quotes, increased responsibility towards the investment community in classifying investments. That seems like an unstable solution, and it's welcome, therefore, that a more fundamental review of the SFDR is already underway, although substantial changes to it will probably take years rather than months. More positively, further draft EU taxonomy rules were issued at the beginning of April. These technical criteria, which had been expected last year, define the tests for determining whether an activity that contributes to one of the EU taxonomy's non-climate related objectives qualifies as taxonomy aligned. These are important and supplement the already existing climate related taxonomy rules. The new rules run to over 100 pages, and they in fact include some proposed changes to the existing rules, and firms only have until the 3rd of May to comment on them. The drafts are controversial in some respects, as is the taxonomy project as a whole, in fact, but at least these developments can be counted as progress. The taxonomy may be a slow burn, and we've heard this week that some of the inevitable political compromises are already being challenged in the courts, but the taxonomy is likely to have very important capital allocation consequences in the years to come and is a flagship EU sustainability reform. Meanwhile, in the UK, there was also much for the market to absorb. Even though most large companies, asset managers, and asset owners will soon have to produce detailed reports on their climate-related risks and opportunities using the TCFD recommendations as their framework, the UK still remains behind the EU on a more general disclosure and labelling framework, and indeed on a taxonomy. The UK regulator has been consulting on disclosures and labels for regulated firms, but has been taken aback by some of the feedback received from the market. It's clear that it will need more time to reflect on the consultation responses if it's to avoid some of the mistakes made by the EU's SFDR. The FCA's announcement that it's delaying the introduction of its regime until the 3rd quarter of this year was not entirely surprising, and is evidence that the regulator wants to get the rules right before launching them. But the FCA published another important discussion paper in February, and although it made no concrete proposals, the paper could be important it may herald more prescriptive requirements for UK regulated firms to integrate sustainability considerations into their governance, to their remuneration structures, and to their required competencies. In addition, the UK's proposed new offence of failure to prevent fraud, announced in February but confirmed last week, is also likely to create more compliance work for firms. And then, at the end of March, the UK government made a series of announcements on so-called Green Day. These included a reconfirmation of the UK's commitment to become the world's first net zero aligned financial centre. Although many commentators were disappointed by the lack of committed public financing, there was certainly nothing on the scale of the US's Inflation Reduction Act, nor even a commitment to match the EU's draft Net Zero Industry Act, which was also published in March. But the UK announcements did confirm that progress continues to be made on a green taxonomy, and a consultation is scheduled for the autumn. But the government is treading carefully here. There will be an initial testing period for at least 2 reporting periods, they say, before taxonomy reporting will be made mandatory. That's to ensure the information generated by the taxonomy is accessible, reliable, and useful. We also had confirmation that international sustainability reporting standards, and certainly not the EU ones, will form the basis for any economy-wide disclosure regime. And there was a pledge to consider adoption of the TNFD, the natural environment's equivalent of climate's TCFD. There was also a commitment to work with interested parties to clarify a pension trustee's fiduciary duty, or indeed ability, to take account of certain ESG factors in decision making. The UK still has a lot to do if it's to match its warm words with concrete policy initiatives, while the EU continues to press on with extensive and costly disclosure regimes in the hope that they will deliver real-world benefits. Although regarded by many as a second best option and not without political difficulties, a policy prescription in favour of disclosure is likely to be politically expedient, and it's therefore here to stay. That means there will be a lot more for firms and for their advisors to read, to interpret, and to apply in the years ahead. Thank you for listening. If you'd like more information on this topic, please check out our website, where you can also sign up to receive future editions of these insights, or you can drop me an email, simon.whitney@travissmith.com.